Welcome back to Murray End. My name's Mark Machado. I'm joined today by my cousin across the pond in North America, Dominic Machado. Uh, Before we start, just a reminder to, if you haven't subscribed already, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening in your podcast app, follow us. And if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, do that now. That's free. That comes into your inbox about once a week. We write a longish piece about something that's going on with Sri Lankan cricket. It's worth signing up just to read Nick Brooks and Dominic writings about things. Occasionally I chip in with something which is kind of quite mediocre in comparison. But yeah, sign up, tell your friends about us. We talk about Sri Lankan cricket in English at least once a week, quite often more than that, basically because we love it. And do leave a comment below as well, because we'd love to hear what you guys are saying. Dom, today we're talking about this press conference that was held by the selectors a few hours ago in the early morning. I'm going to say it was early morning in London. It was the middle of the night for you. I think it was about mid-morning in Colombo when it all happened. We are talking through the kind of key points from it. I'm going to go down what the kind of top 10 bits that we picked out of it. I say we, I mean the Murray team. And we'll just go through it one by one. I think the most important part of this is that Winindu Hasaranga, our captain and talisman, should be fit for at least the start of the tournament and is, fully fit. He's had the all clear. He missed the IPL to make sure he was going to be fit. He missed the last 50 over World Cup. We've seen him in T20s as the captain this year already. This surely has got to be his kind of major breakout tournament, right?
Yeah. He's established himself as Sri Lanka's star, and he had big tournaments in 21 and 22. But I think this is the time where he really has to step up and be the star of the squad. I was excited to see that he actually bowled, I think, in the last of the sort of intra squad T20 games. So when they say he's fit, that means that we're willing to put him on the field. I'm excited to see what he does. Conditions, that's something we'll talk about in a minute, would seem to favor his type of bowling. And I just really want to see him stamp that authority and claim his place as, one of the 10 best T20 players in the world, because I think there are very few players who bring his quality in terms of bowling, in terms of batting, and in terms of fielding. I think this is a chance for him to be recognized, as he justly should be, as an out and out star on the world stage.
He kind of came to prominence as a captain during the last LPL, where his beloved Candy side ended up winning the whole thing. And he did tear his hamstring while trying to bat on one leg, and he tore his hamstring, then continued to bat on one leg, which I suppose. Well, you could argue that either way. It did mean that he missed a heck of a lot of cricket afterwards, though we don't really know if actually the batting helped or hindered that injury. He's captain going into this tournament. There's an IPL mega auction at the end of the year. He got released by RCB this time last year after the last IPL. Since then, though, I feel like his stock among Sri Lankans has risen, but his stock around the rest of the world isn't quite where it should be, I don't think.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think what Sri Lankans value about him in particular is his batting. I think the rest of the world sees him as a leg spinner who's got a wicked googly. And yes, he does have that. And I think also they tend to see him, he gets tonked around every once in a while. But there is not one spin bowler on the planet. Jasprit Bumrah is an alien and doesn't really count anyway, if we're including fast bowlers. But there's not one spin bowler on the planet who doesn't go around the park a little bit. Everybody does. That's just kind of the nature of the game. So I don't see any reason to have any doubts about his quality. I think he is a smart bowler. He's a tactical bowler. I think this is really going to be a World Cup where he can showcase, one, his improvement as a bowler, but two, his value with the bat. We've seen in Sri Lankan colors and for beloved Candy, an exciting all-around talent, someone who can score at a strike rate of around 200 and who is exceptionally good at bashing spin around. And I think he's going to play a key role in sort of firing up the Sri Lankan middle overs in this tournament too. So I think that he's been kind of on the wane, but I think he has a lot of talent to show, and I think this tournament is set up to be the perfect showcase for this. The other part of it is if he does well, it kind of sets us up from a captaincy perspective for the next couple World Cups. We will follow Hasaranga wherever he takes us. He has incredible value. He's a great player, and I think if he can establish himself as a top draw leader, then Sri Lanka cricket will be in good stead. One problem to look out for: demerit points. He's got a few of them on his record. The last two T20 games he played, he has faced suspensions because of that. He rejoined the test squad because he was very, 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 very eager to start playing test cricket again. So he was suspended for the first two Bangladesh tests. So he's going to be back for us. But he's got to really kind of cool it and keep the temperature under wraps, because losing him would be a big, big issue.
Let's move on to point two, because it is kind of related to what could happen if we lose him, and that is that they talked about another all action spinning all rounder. That's one of my favourites, Walalage, and they reiterated something that you said in the last
Yeah.
episode we did, Dob. That's that Weller's been brought in as another spin option. They're not seeing him at this stage as the all rounder, right?
Yeah, they're bringing him in as a third spin option, as an alternative to Thikshana or Hasaranga there, because one, he's slow left arm. So against right-handed batsmen, they are very, very handy. They think the conditions also are going to be favorable. We've seen how well can bowl in the LPL, in the ILT20. And interestingly, he has not made his Sri Lankan debut in T20Is. He's played something like 25 odd ODI games and a test, but no T20Is. So I think this is a good decision. I think it's a good decision to play him as a spinner and not try to kind of cover up one of the batting spots as an all-rounder bits and pieces kind of player. And I think the focus for him is going to be on his bowling. Mark, I think we had a little bit of a debate going on in the Murley and WhatsApp group. Who do you think he comes in for? Who do you think he plays for when he's playing that third spinner role?
So kind of common convention would suggest they would drop one of Angelo or Sharnica, right? So if that's the decision, I think they're dropping Dustin, because I think Angelo probably is a more consistent hitter, and I think I'm just going to say I think he's actually just got the ear of Wani. I think he's got the ear of the captain, and I think that's more important. And I think Dasan looks and feels a little bit like yesterday's man. We know what he can do. We know that he's not afraid to bowl the hard overs or to bowl when times when things aren't going well. But I just think this is Hasaranga's side, and
Mm.
he wants his confidant and mentor Angelo in the team if he can get him in. I also wonder though if actually there's a situation where in all our kind of 11s we're kind of expecting, or I'm kind of expecting Sadira to be in there, and whether he's the man that ends up getting
Mm.
dropped, depending on how the other batters are doing, or if you know it's just straight a bowler swap situation,
Yeah.
because we kind of don't know who what our starting 11, what our kind of main seam bowlers are going to be,
Mhm.
right? But Dom, I throw it back to you. If you were going for you're going to drop Angelo or Dustin, who are you going to drop?
I think it's a tricky question. I tend to think that Sri Lanka can cover Angelo's bowling capabilities a little bit more easily, right? You really want him bowling in the power play, not really anywhere else, right? So I think they have plenty of power play options, whether it's Will Alage or Tikshana in the power play, or just giving more overs up front to seamers. I think Dawson has more flexibility. You can use him later in the innings. You can even use him as a death bowler. I think as a power hitter, Dawson offers more. I think Angelo, you're right, is more consistent. it might depend, and tell me what you think about this, on what the other team's bowling attack looks like. I think if it's spin heavier, you might want to go with Angelo, right? So especially if they have a leg spinner, because we've talked a lot about Dawson's weakness against leg spin. Um, so it might also be a call based on who they think might provide a little bit more batting support in the conditions, right? I think on a belter of a pitch, you probably want Dawson. If you want, if it's going to turn a bit and the spinners are going to be in the game, you probably want Angelo.
Um, I'm interested to see how this pans out, right?
Yeah,
Because we're kind of going into it. We're going to talk about this as the next point, almost about why Barnacle Roger Patterson wasn't picked in the side. We are kind of going into the tournament, and the kind of perception at Murley and HQ is that our batting is not an issue. It's kind of on full slash working to the kind of par that we thought Headley steadying in, looking towards an upward trajectory. So I think two things are going to happen though: is that one player will be out of form because that is the nature
yeah.
of the game. So one of our batters will just not fire. It's really really unlikely that all of them will fire at the same time. Next point that was made in the press conference, I think, relates to the whole Dustin Angelo debate. That is that Bardica Rajapaksa was not picked in the side. They believe within the 15 they have enough power there as it is. Again, this is kind of confirming the theory that we had floated in our previous episode that actually a lot of the players who were around Barnaker when he was last in the side have actually kind of improved. The
Yeah.
power hitting's improved. Um, I'm a big believer that power hitting isn't necessarily, having muscle helps, but technique is much, much more important. I think in kind of for more casual cricket fans, they still might not realise this at this point and this moment in kind of T20's evolution, where I think there's still for a perception that if a player has larger biceps, they're more likely to find um, the boundary. I also think, in a way, actually, for the bulkier players, it kind of could often mean that you get caught out because you rely much more on brute force than you do technique. So I'm personally, I'm not, I don't think the size of a player is the be all and end
Mhm.
all of it. Even though if you do watch the IPL, maybe you might think I'm wrong. But they seem to think that as we do, that our batting is kind of in not an issue at the moment, and the batting unit is quite kind of content, and that's why Barnacle didn't make the 15. He is travelling with them though, so if there is an issue, and we know in part in the last few World Cups there has been issues with Sri Lankan players, and other players have come in. What do you make of what they said about Barnaker's
Mm.
non-inclusion, and also the fact that they are taking him along for the ride?
Yeah. So I kind of don't buy the argument that we have power in the 15 picked. I sort of think that power is just a word that people are throwing around without actually thinking about what it means, right? What we want is quick scoring, right? And that can be achieved, yes, if you can muscle the ball over the boundaries. But Bonica has never been a guy who can just muscle the balls over the boundaries. I think he has excellent timing, and that's how he does it. But he's not like Dre Russ or Kieran Pollard, who can just smash the ball and a miss hit can easily go for six. I think it's about a combination of execution and intent, right? It's about having a plan and saying, okay, there's this wide open area. I'm going to have a go at it, and this is how I'm going to execute it, right? So I think players can get there. Someone like Pathum Nissanka is a great example of a player who has developed a skill set, right? Has learned how to execute to fulfill intent. And I think that's really important. Same thing with Charith Asalanka, especially with his six hitting. He has learned how to execute that and knows when to use it. So I think that's a bit more important than just having brute power, as you said, Mark. It's not just a technique issue. Um, so I think I back this batting lineup pretty strongly. I think they've performed well, and I think there's a lot of talent in there, especially compared to the 21 and 22 additions of this squad. The other bit, I think, maybe pertains to they don't want to say Bonica isn't fit and can't field properly, which is what I kind of think one of the reasons is that if Bonica is not super fit and isn't a good fielder and isn't going to make the starting 11, right? If they've decided that already, there's very limited value in carrying him in the 15. You can bring DDS or Will Alligay on, right? And they're both gun fielders, and that's exactly what you want. The second thing is, I think if you put Bonica in the 15, then immediately everyone starts thinking, okay, well, when are we going to bring Bonica in? When someone misfires, right? Charas starts off with a little bit of a slow tournament, or Kamindu Mendes, and everyone's calling for his head before he's even really had a chance. So I think it's kind of a intuitive way of backing the top 7 batters that you're sort of supporting and saying, look, we're not thinking we're going to bring in some other guy to replace you. This is your spot. We want you to have it for the tournament and own it. Now, in case of injury, we can bring in Bonica and we have that backup option. Because I think, we've talked about this many times, Mark, Sri Lankan players are confidence players. When you back them, when you say we support your skills and we think that you're going to succeed, they can do very, very well. But if they have, one eye over their shoulder, someone like Avishka Fernando is a good example, they're always going to be not playing to their full potential, right? So I think that's also part of it, is that, okay, Bonica doesn't particularly add much in the 15 if he's not in the starting lineup, right? Like I would say if you said, okay, we want to start with him, that's fine. I would accept that. But if you're going to carry him in the 15 and not play him, that's useless. And then keeping him out of the 15 with the possibility of bringing him in opens up opportunities for the batters you've committed to just really focus on their game and not be looking over their shoulder thinking they're just going to place the call to Bonica and have him come in my stead.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't thought about the psychological side of putting him in the 15 and not starting him. I think the fielding thing is a huge consideration, and maybe it's time we all start wearing, or at least get you a Mickey was right t-shirt. Because obviously Mickey Arthur, in reference to Mickey Arthur's fallout with Barnacle Rajapaksa over his fitness and his personal fitness levels. They talked about DDS, good bowler, good fielder, well suited for the conditions, and kind of implied he'll be on the bench as well, which is kind of what we've discussed this. I think we kind of suggested that they might think like this about 3 or 4 episodes ago now. I also think the other thing to consider is that DDS is considered a leader. He's a Test captain within kind of Sri Lankan cricket and the setup. By all accounts, he's a pretty top bloke. If you're a young cricketer, this squad's a really interesting squad, and some of the discussions around it, right? Talking about how fielders. DDS is on that plane because he's a good fielder. Wello is on that plane because he's a multi-skilled cricketer, right? They talked about Kusal Pereira among the names. Turns out it sounds like Hassa and Chris Silverwood weren't, wanted other players over him. I'm not going to say they didn't want him. I'm not going to say that there's any sort of issue because, as far as I'm aware, there isn't. My Sinhalese isn't perfect though, so maybe I'm wrong. I'm kind of surprised that there was how much outrage there seems to be online about his inclusion, because I just feel like he hasn't really done much for Sri Lanka in the last kind of couple of years. Or if I missed something here, Dom?
No, I 100% agree with you. I'm trying to think of the last big time knock he's kind of played for Sri Lanka in international colors. And where the other question is, who are you going to replace him with, or who is he going to replace if he comes into the lineup, right? Because if you think about sort of a left-hander batting at the top of the order, I think time is better spent backing Kamindu and Charith, who I think are very, very talented players and can surpass certainly what Kusal can do. You might get a KJP special, right, where he scores 80 off of 40 or something like that every once in a while. But he's very vulnerable against pace early in the innings. We kind of know how he's going to play. Teams know how to bowl to him. I think he's a very well known quantity. And this is not to say that he hasn't been a very valuable player in T20 eyes for Sri Lanka. He absolutely has. But I think at 33, almost 34, he's more or less run the course of his international Sri Lankan career and should look to make big bucks in various league deals throughout the world.
I don't think his international career is over. If he wants it to be, I think he can go away. He can get stronger, get fitter, and he can find his form again. I think he's just one of those players who just hasn't. He's been really unlucky with injury almost all the way through his career.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a time when it's kind of taken its toll. It doesn't mean look at Angelo, right? We all thought he was never going to play T20 cricket again, and look here, we're the forefront of this squad, right?
I think I definitely have said those words that he will. I don't imagine he will ever be around the T20 squad as of a couple months ago, and look where we are.
In Sri Lankan cricket, if you work hard, then anything is possible. People might not notice you've worked hard, or you might end up being the captain again. Who knows?
Yeah.
Matisha Patharana is fit and will be fit and will be available from the beginning of the tour. Right. This is such an interesting thing, right? Because he was on fire for CSK, and then he goes back for a visa to go to the US Embassy to sort his visa out, a visa appointment. And he basically, I don't think he comes back after that, does he? He's kind of just hung around.
No. Yeah, it was announced that he had a niggle, and then that he had to travel back, and then he just never seems to have gone back. I feel like, and again, I don't know how much we should trust timelines that one can derive from social media, but I thought I saw a picture of him and Deekshana in Dharmashala, and so maybe he picked up an injury in training or something like that, and then was sent back. But I don't quite have the timeline on all of that to resolve it. But him being fit is just such a huge thing for this side. And I want to talk a little bit about his star power. I think we all saw that commercial. What a great commercial that was. And Mark had the great comment of, I wonder if he did his hamstring and chasing that jersey, but he's got that magnetic star power. He's got the aw shucks look on him. I wonder if he is going to be kind of the next poster boy for Sri Lanka cricket. He's got the sort of the great story about him. He's got the good looks. He's got the sort of very charming qualities about him. So that was another thing I had noticed, totally irrelevant to the point about his cricket playing, but I do think he's got that star potential there.
Do you know what I thought was interesting about that? I thought it was interesting that Hasaranga wasn't more front and center of that advert.
Yeah.
Right? And I wonder if there's something going on there. Why they picked who they picked.
Yeah. It was interesting choice, right? Like, they picked Kalu, they picked Deekshana and Shanaka.
Yeah, it might just be that all those guys were available that day, and Hasaranga was getting rehab or treatment or doing something more important. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know what the idea is. Again, me and Dom are slightly hamstrung when we comment about this, because we don't live in Sri Lanka, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know what on the streets of Colombo, the streets of Kandy, who the kids are idolising. I'd imagine off the back of his IPL performances, Patharana is right up there with people who are being idolised by the kids right now. Another youngster who deserves to be idolised is Veerscan, and they talked about how they ended up picking him, and we speculated about whether or not he's going to make the squad, whether or not he's going to be in the team. He's not in the 15, but he is one of the travelling reserves, which, like, in a way, I think you can read as kind of, that's with how bad we are, or how unfit some of our players appear to be when it comes to major tournaments. That's pretty much like being in the squad. He came in over Van der Sey and Akila. I was expecting Akila Dhanajaya to be in the squad. mainly because they took him to Bangladesh, and
Yeah.
before that, he was in the Afghanistan squad. Kind of, I thought when they brought him back, I thought it was a slightly left field pick.
Yeah.
Van der Sar essentially off the back. Sorry, not Van der Sar. Veerkamp essentially off the back of one strong IPL performance is on that flight. I say off the back off. They've said it's on the back of his form. He took loads of wickets in the IL T20.
Yes. Yeah.
He's a net bowler at SRH. Obviously, Murali is a bowling coach at SRH. They've signed him up when Hasaranga pulled out. I mean, that's a pretty big endorsement.
Yeah.
It didn't, they weren't calling for Van der Sar and Akila. I love them both, but those guys were not in consideration for that spot.
Right.
So if he's good enough for SRH, he's good enough for us, I'd say. So I think that's absolutely the right call.
Mm-hmm.
It's, we've talked at length with Murali and about how great a story Veerkamp is. I've written about it. Go
read it. It's really good.
Go read it on the newsletter, muraliend.substack.com. It's a great story, and obviously we hope his career goes from strength to strength, and we hope he learns a lot from it. I do think it's interesting, Don, because me and you, or at least I would consider that he hasn't made a senior appearance for Sri Lanka in any format, let alone T20. But some people,
the Asia Games, right? That's
yeah.
It's technically counted as a T20I appearance. That is like the ICC's official ruling that they count towards statistical things, towards rankings. So like kind of Ravi Bishnoi, I don't know if you remember this, got to number 1 in the T20 bowler rankings, and people were complaining because he played 3 games in the Asian Games and took a boatload of wickets, and that was a big part of it. So they technically count it as a cap. But I think you're right that he hasn't really made his senior debut for Sri Lanka in a meaningful sense. Another part of this too is I think people were a little bit frustrated because we heard, this experience thing come up, right? And then and that was the excuse for having Van der Sar and Akila in the squad, right? And now, in terms of experience, you turned away KJP, Bhanuka Rajapaksa, and then these two. So a lot of people are interpreting experience as sort of a watchword to get Angelo into the squad. But I think, we shouldn't hold them accountable for saying, okay, well, we valued experience, and then we ended up deciding, we're actually going to pick the better player, which I think is what they did in Viaskant's case. I think if you ask most Sri Lankan fans, who would you rather have in the squad? They would definitely have Viaskant over Akila and Van der Sar. And just to kind of point it out, Akila and Van der Sar got smacked around really badly in the inter-squad tournament. And I think it kind of showed, okay, these guys are not really ready for top draw cricket. And we have someone like Pat Cummins, right, a World Cup winning captain, saying, I want this guy in my squad and I want this guy to play over an Aiden Markram, right? That's a big endorsement. That's telling you that this guy has serious skills and we ought to have him in the team. I think, again, Akila and Van der Sar are probably also, if they were better fielders, they might have found themselves in the squad as the third spinner instead of Will Alagay.
Mate, I still have nightmares from Akila's last time I saw him bowl in the Caribbean.
Oh yeah,
for 6 sixes.
Yeah,
though he did he get he got a hat trick?
He got a hat trick before that, and then got smacked for 6 sixes after that. Which it's interesting, Mark. I was going to say West Indian exploits are interesting because of Will Alagay, because of what he did in the under-19 World Cup. So maybe there's a little bit of a backing of him because they've seen him perform in those conditions. Just to get back to the spinner issue. Sorry.
Well, that also leads us on to the next issue because they talked about the pitches, they talked about the dropping pitches. They talked that they were coming from Australia, but they still expect them to be slightly uneven.
Yeah.
Much like, and you might be able to shed some more light on this because I'm not going to lie, I didn't watch a huge amount of Major League Cricket last year, but apparently the Dallas wicket that they had last year was uneven, or the Dallas wicket, there was only one wicket, right? I think.
Yeah.
And they're kind of expecting something similar. I believe now, Dom, the pitch is in situ in New York for that first game.
Yes.
Have you got an update? Because I know you don't live close by it, but you have relatives who live close by it. And I've been told that they're throwing salt on the pitch to dry it out, right?
Yeah. No, it's I have seen what they've been trying to lay. There've been a lot of good pictures coming out of New York to show that. I think one thing that was interesting was Thurunga was kind of talking about the United States as if it was one climate. And I think they should be a little bit careful about this. We can't equate all of these pitches to the same climate. And to give a little bit of backstory, so the pitch was apparently it was constructed in Australia, and then it was in Florida. It was grown in Florida for several months because New York is too cold to, it would have just died and shriveled up had they brought it there. So they grew it in Florida where it's much, much warmer. And then they shipped it up to New York. So there are all these little variations here that are worth paying attention to. And Sri Lanka's first three games are in the US. So New York can be in early June, could be anything from a sort of Colombo equivalent where it's hot and humid and sticky to Melbourne where it's a little chilly and rainy and not particularly great. But when we go to Dallas, it's basically like West Pakistan. So we have a dry, crumbly, not very rainy area that's very, very hot. And then when we go to Florida, that'll be like Colombo again, hot, humid, very muggy, moisture in the air, thunderstorms in the afternoon. So I think we want to be a little careful about saying that all these pitches will be the same because there are very, very different conditions. And I think the day conditions may affect very much the type of bowling that will be effective or what type of batting is going to work well. So I tend to agree that it's going to be more spin friendly, but I really have no perception of what this New York pitch is going to look like because we don't know what the weather is going to be like leading up to the actual game.
They talked about Hassa. Oh, sorry, I should just add that no Sri Lankans are throwing salt on the pitch. If you listen to that ICC, I'm just trying to make a joke. We are not. There is no Murley End attack on this pitch happening. There's no ball tampering. I live in London. I'm very far away. Dom is very far away.
I'm in Massachusetts. Can't do it.
Yeah, the pitch is protected 24/7. We can't run on it. I'm more worried about South African cricket fans hearing this and coming after me. So we are not trying to tamper with the pitch. We're not Australians. We wouldn't do anything like that. 9.9 on our list of 10 points is that Hassa is going to be a floater. He's going to float around the kind of top order. I am excited about this. We kind of touched upon this briefly at the top when we talked about it. They were saying that he is fit and will start from the get-go. How this got to be his breakout tournament for me. He does that by getting loads of wickets and scoring lots of runs and just going at pace. Sri Lanka are at their best when Hasaranga is scoring at pace. We saw that at the Asian Cup final. We want to see that right at the beginning at New York as well. On that day, I'm excited. I'm also apprehensive and nervous about it, but I really hope he can pull this off. They say floater. Where's he coming in, Dom? Is he coming in at 4?
So I read floater as basically, so if you look at the numbers, there are two Sri Lankan batters who really can bash about spin. And that's Kusal Mendes and Wanindu Hasaranga. So they tend to gum up, Sri Lanka tend to gum up in the middle overs against spin. Instead of going 8s and 9s, they'll go for 6s and 5s, and they'll knock it around a little bit. And Charith can also hit spin too, I will say that. But Hasaranga is definitely, his ploy is to put the spinners off the length and pump them down the ground and put them under pressure. Because I think he is one of the most comfortable at playing different types of spin, hitting boundaries off of spin. So that's my kind of perception, is that when they say floater, what they mean is if a wicket falls between overs, say 6 and 10, that's when he's likely to come in, right? To kind of influence the game and add some impetus. So that's how I'm viewing it, is that they want him to kind of be a spin basher in the middle overs. And that's where they see him as like adding the most value relative to the other players that he's playing with.
I don't think that in cricket in general, we use the idea of floating enough
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to batting. So we talk about matchups with the bowling on the bowling side, looking for matchups. We don't do it in reverse enough, right? You should be able to kind of look at a team's lineup and
Yeah.
kind of figure out who they're going to bowl when, or when they want to bowl who when,
Right.
right? And kind of chase the matchup the other way,
Yeah.
almost, right? And especially if you look at this Sri Lankan batting lineup that you've got going to this tournament, there's loads of players there who can do a job in
Mm-hmm.
different positions, have
Yep.
different strengths, different weaknesses. So I'm glad they're using him as a floater, but I kind of think it might be a wise idea to use other players as floaters as well.
Yeah.
Right? Kind of almost, if you can put other players in almost as a break, right? Some players are going to score much quicker than others, and some players are hard to get out than others, right? So, and you know what their strengths and weaknesses are. So if we're going to float Hassa, we're going to float Wani, then let's float almost all of them part of the openers.
So tell me who you would float. Tell me who you think would be good in that role.
Well, I think it depends, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, you want some teams you want a left and right combination. Some teams you might want a left and left, and some teams you might want a right and right. Some teams, might have got 2 wickets in the power play, but in the process you start, 6 overs of the best bowlers. So you know that they're going to play one bowler out of position. Or why don't you try and force them in to playing one of their bowlers into in a time that they don't want to play them, right?
Yeah.
If you send in, I'm just using them as an example. Send in Angelo at over 6 and go, look, we know that so and so will want to bowl to you. We know that that's a matchup that they'll want. Let's try and coach that out of them so that we don't have to face that over right at the end, because it's just matchups work both ways, right? So I mean, I can't give an example because I don't know what teams are going to face or what moments, right? You know that Bangladesh game, that wicket off Angelo is going to be massive. You know that they are obsessed by us, right? They're obsessed by us, and they're even more obsessed by Angelo. He's like, the snake king that they all whose skin they all crave. So get him in early and get those, get him facing the fizz early, so we don't have him at the back or whatever their bowling plans are. Let's try and disrupt them. Be disruptive. Let's find a way.
I think.
God, I don't know. Do I sound like a mad ranting man?
No. I think there are some value to it, right? So, like in particular, there are some spinners who will always bowl in certain positions, right? And you can use certain matchups, right? Like I wouldn't be opposed to bringing in someone like Charth Asalanka at 4 if that team has a slow out. They say there's Mitch Santner is out there, right? Just bring out Asalanka and have him take him down, right? Put him out of position, and because he's a left-hander and he can handle it, right? Or if it's a team that is stacked with off spinners, a team like Bangladesh, which is stacked with off spinners, right? Force them to try to have to bowl those off spinners against right-handed batters, right? And I think you're right. I think it would require, and I think this is one of the things that I'm hoping Sri Lanka is doing, this sort of ball by ball planning, right? In a 20 over match, you can gain a lot by saying, okay, this is how this team usually bowls. These are the overs they usually bowl. How can we put them on their back foot? Which overs do we attack? Which bowlers do we attack? And I think that's the kind of strategy that you need to have to win these games. And I mentioned this to you, Mark, earlier, like South Africa, right? You've known you're playing them for 6 months. You come into that game with the most detailed plan that you possibly can have. How are you going to get all their batters out? And then which bowlers are you going to target, right? For example, that would be a good game for Charith and Wainendu to come in a little early, because they've got 2 left arm spinners who can be taken for runs if they are attacked. And so I don't know if they're planning that, but that's something that I would think should be on their minds.
Sri Lankan cricket, and we've talked about this a lot on the Marillion. Sri Lankan cricket's at its best when it's trying to outthink what the opposition is going to do, right? We're not the world's most resourced team. We're not the world's biggest team, but we can be the team that puts the most amount of thought into it, because that just takes time, right? And we've got 20 million collective brains at
Yeah.
least to source out ideas from and plans from. So let's try and
Yeah.
let's try and find a way, because if you go back and you read Nick's Book and Islands 11,
Yeah.
the thing Sri Lanka does is it finds a way,
Yeah.
right? So let's try and do something that no one else is
Yeah.
at this point kind of thinking of. I'm sure
Yeah.
in time to come it'll be a much more
Right.
commonly thought of thing. The final point that was made in the press conference, of note, is something that I'm kind of quite skeptical of, where they've basically said they're expecting scores to be between like 160 and 165. I'm a bit like, and this relates back to your
Yeah.
point about the pitches in the USA.
Yeah.
There's two trains of thoughts behind this. Firstly, they're kind of considering, look, even if we lose that first game against South Africa, or we'll beat Bangladesh and we'll beat the Netherlands, we'll beat Nepal, and then we'll get through to Caribbean. And the Caribbean pitches, there's a lot more data. We know what they're going to play like, and that's what we're estimating.
Yeah.
And they're kind of hoping that they'll have enough muscle, will have enough brains to get through that kind of opening, the initial group stage,
Yeah.
and they're not putting much thought into it. Or they're just kind of thinking that's a number that we think we can get to every single game, regardless of who we bat against. And both of those things make me quite nervous, because if you look at the way it's all going in the IPL,
Yeah.
and even if you go look at the massive scores we had at the 50 over World Cup, scores are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And 160 suddenly in T20 doesn't feel that big.
No, 160 is not a defensible total, right? You even early wickets don't, teams feel comfortable even if they're at 65 4-3 at 10 overs chasing down 165. So I think a more realistic total for this squad is 180 190. I think that's what you kind of want to aim for and set up for. In fact, I think their average over the last couple of years has been like around 175. So I think 180 190 pushing 200 should be what they're aiming for. We saw in these warm-up matches a lot of high-scoring matches. We saw one game where I forget who it was. Someone scored 252. There's another where someone scored 225. Right? It's they have the capability. I do not think that they should go out and limit themselves and say, okay, let's tick along at 8 and over, unless they know for a fact that the pitch is tacky and tricky. I think they should be going early, looking to score runs. I think wickets are overvalued in T20 cricket on a batting perspective, because how often do you get bowled out? It's not, very rarely are you're like,
yeah, look, I think that actually, because that's what Ashwin said, right?
Yeah.
I think that maybe only applies to franchise games.
Yeah.
And actually, I think in international cricket, until we get to the kind of top end teams,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's true, right? Because I still think that wickets give you momentum, and actually against like even South Africa, I think going into it, you should be looking to. I still think, and maybe I'm old fashioned in my thoughts, I still think that group stage should be looking to bowl, be looking to get 40 wickets from that.
Yeah. No. Oh, yes, absolutely. I think we should, as a bowling team. I mean that from a batting perspective, is that teams tend to bat more conservatively, and so they're like, oh, let's preserve wickets, and then they end up with a middling score for 4 or for 5. When if they had pushed the tempo a little bit more and used more of those resources, they could have gotten a bit more in the way of runs. But yes, no, against those teams they're playing, they should be looking to take wickets. I have a spoiler for the newsletter. I have a piece coming out on bowling analysis, and one of the points I want to make is economy doesn't really matter that much, and we should really be thinking, how can we take as many wickets as possible, because you're going to get smashed around, right? If you play defensive cricket in 2024, you're not going to win games.
Tom, I think that's a great place to leave it. I was a little bit worried that we weren't going to have enough to talk about, but I think we've been blathering on for at least just over 40 minutes now.
Yeah.
So that's our kind of Muralien's take on the press conference that was held by the selectors today. Look, as we're getting closer to this tournament, I'm getting more and more excited. Dom, you're getting excited because you're going to be there. I'm just buzzing for it. Muralien's got a lot of stuff coming out. If you've got this way, all this far to the end of this show, and you haven't subscribed, then what are you doing? Hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, sign up for the newsletter to read Dom's bone analysis that's coming out. We'll be back very soon with more content. Thanks for watching.